Hey everyone, it's me HawkeyeG, and I'm here with another video for you. This time I'm doing a complete campaign guide for the northern provinces of Cathay. As we've talked about before, they start a bit closer to the Bastion, which means you'll have to address those problems earlier on. They also start much further from the ogres as well, giving you more time to decide how you want to handle them. And they also have some of the stronger Cathay factions closer to them here in the north, which means you should be able to confederate them and get off to a very strong start earlier on. Now, as always, if you enjoyed these videos, please remember to like and subscribe. If you have any questions or advice of your own, I'd be happy to see you leave them in the comments section below. For these complete campaign guides for the Realm of Chaos campaigns, I like to go over a quick overview of the campaign, giving brief glimpses at how it plays out and what some key points and goals are. I then want to talk about the building and military considerations. Are there any special buildings which are important to mention, or any special military units that are going to be important for us or for certain enemies? And then I make a series of goals based on the rift cycles. So about every 30 turns, the rifts open. So we're going to try to set specific objectives and try to complete them within a series of 30 turns. And then once we reach a point of stability and solidarity, by probably around turn 90, I'll discuss the remaining factors and features of the campaign. For those who are curious, I did play this campaign on hard campaign and normal battle difficulty. The way that it went, I definitely think I could have managed it on very hard, so we'll see that. But with that being said, let's get into the video. So like I said, I want to start with a brief overview of the campaign. We'll take a look at each rift cycle and briefly describe what the goals are for each phase. On turn 1, we have a lot of things to address in a relatively short period of time to address them. We of course need to take out the rebel lords of Nanyang and wipe out the Tzeentch settlement here as well before they cause too many problems. And then if possible, we want to try to take over the Warpstone Desert here from the Dissenter Lords of Jinshen as well. We can't really see all of it here in this screenshot, but we're at war with them by default, and they hold this whole stretch as well as a little Skaven. It's also important to watch for potential confederations for the two factions here to our north. Then we have to go into the rifts. Now, if we haven't successfully confederated both of these northern factions, the Imperial Wardens and the Celestial Loyalists by now, we should probably be able to do so. It's okay if we didn't capture the whole Warpstone Desert, but we will want to eliminate the Dissenter Lords of Jinshen if they still live. Then the next step is to clean up the interior, helping these northern factions and then the eastern factions attack and wipe out any of these remaining enemies. We should be able to confederate and complete that kind of cleanup process as well, and then we have to go into the rifts again. If everything has gone as well for you as it did here for me, you're probably already in a position to just sit and click end turn for the rest of the campaign as long as you keep going into the rifts. Depending on how you and Zhao Ming have addressed the ogres, specifically Greasus, especially in the later game here, you may have to fight some of them, or all of them, or you may simply desire that. Otherwise you might have, good trade agreements or other deals with them here. It would also be a good time to potentially set up a campaign to wipe out the Oracles of Tzeentch if you would rather do that. Or if you don't want to leave the Bastion or fight the ogres, you could potentially go to the Darklands in the south, but that's a bit of a stretch. It's maybe one of the safer and simpler options, but regardless of that, you don't even have to do any of those things. You should have control of most of Cathay, if not by this point, by the end of this cycle, and be able to just ride that out until the end of the campaign. But of course, next we have to go to the rifts. Now, like I said before, maybe by the end of the second rift cycle, you didn't quite have everything under control, but really by, the beginning of the or the end of the third rift cycle, you really should have control of all of Cathay. You should have most of your diplomacy sorted out, whether you've decided to attack the ogres or befriend them. That should be, complete by this phase. If you're attacking Tzeentch or whatever you feel like doing there, all you really need to do is just hold the line in Cathay. You've got the 3 gates here, and then you essentially have 2 choke points here in the south. You can't necessarily hold this one because Zhao Ming has it, but as long as, he doesn't screw up too bad, he'll be fine. So all you have to do is hold your ground, and you have one more rift cycle to go into. You can keep working on other projects if you want. It definitely doesn't hurt to weaken Tzeentch and even possibly Nurgle to help take pressure off of Kislev if they need it. But if you've made it this far, again, you really don't have to do anything other than sit and bide your time. But that does it for the overview. You can see just a quick glance through this campaign. We get through it pretty easily. But even by turn 60, it's possible to really have Cathay entirely under your control. And from there, you can just ride out the campaign if that's all you want to do. Now, that means it's time for us to talk about the building and military composition considerations for this campaign. Alright, so when I talk about building and military considerations, I usually start by kind of covering some of the landmark buildings that we have here. In Nangao, we have a single landmark building, and the question is, is it worth it? It's kind of worth it, I think. It's good to have for the Bastion and for the battles that take place there. The ammunition increase during siege defense battles will help you out no matter what. And then melee defense plus 6 when defending for all armies. That's actually pretty effective, right? That you can get some pretty crazy values on even something like Jade Warriors getting up to 64 melee defense. And so this is a big part of that bonus. It'll help you out for sure. But overall, I'd say the local bonuses are entirely unnecessary. There should never be a time where Nangao comes under siege unless you don't manage the Snake Gate early enough. Now I talk about taking the Warpstone Desert early on, and of course Shenyang has a landmark building in it as well. I think that this one's pretty good. Gives you diplomacy bonus with all factions, gives you an income from trade bonus faction-wide, and it has a solid amount of income generated. It's pretty easy to create trade routes as Cathay, and you're going to have a lot of different trade resources across your various settlements here, so it's going to be pretty valuable. The last province to talk about is the Imperial Road, specifically the capital here, Weijin. Now, this is like the most critical province for you to hold, the most critical settlement. We have 3 really solid landmark buildings here, right? We've got several faction-wide bonuses for income, for upkeep reduction, growth. We've got local control here. We've got bonuses for some of the best units for the faction. I don't really recruit here much because when you're trying to get economy and hero capacity buildings in here, you might not have room for the Celestial Dragon Guard and Crossbowmen building, but you have the upkeep reduction regardless. And of course, we've got some good local bonuses too, right? We can get lots of control here so we can disregard that building if we want to. I have them for harmony balance. But we still get the harmony buildings here, income from the local province. So overall, these are really good. It's really important that you capture this province and specifically take control of Weijin. Should be able to get it through Confederation. Now, to talk about general building compositions and leading into our military compositions, if we take a look at Nangao, we can see kind of what my setup typically looks like. We do start the game with the Sky Junk, and I don't think that I'll be bringing a lot of additional ones, so I didn't prioritize that, but it does give us the hero capacity if we get this building. I mean, even at tier 3 we get it, but so if we have it in the capital, it doesn't make too much of a difference. It'll give us the increased local recruitment as well, however. The more important one, I think, is to focus on the Celestial Armory. You really want to get this as early as possible. I think most of your armies, like the majority of units in your armies, should be made up of Dragon Guard and Dragon Crossbowmen, especially because as Miao Ying, you get that 50% upkeep reduction, so as early as you can get her Dragon Crossbowmen into her army, that will help pay off a lot. Even having the ammunition bonus for all missile units will help for her. In fact, you start the game with this forge building, and I think I would delete that. I don't think that artillery is as useful in this game because of all the settlement battles that you'll be doing. It seems like in this particular campaign, it's a little less frequent because you're going to get attacked a lot at the Bastion and might be able to take more field battles, but I don't think that starting with something like Iron Hail Gunners is the right choice. I do think that you could make an argument for going into artillery, because those, of course, will benefit from the ammunition bonus and some other bonuses Miao Ying has, but overall, I ended up going for the cavalry, because I just think that it's more useful in the current state of Total War Warhammer 3. This is speaking from version patch 1.1, so maybe when they make the changes to the number of settlement battles you have, somewhere down the road, patch 1.4 or 1.5 maybe, we'll see some differences there, but for now, yeah, I think like even a single Sky Junk with a couple of flying Longbow Riders and then just a bunch of Dragon Crossbowmen and Dragon Guard, that's really going to do some good work for you. Cavalry, even on the ground, is going to be a lot more valuable to you in the settlement battles in current game state than I think the artillery will. In addition to that, you just kind of fill out economy buildings, you put in some other things to balance out the harmony wherever you can or wherever you need to. Of course, we want to get, Astromancer capacity increase if we can, and Terracotta Sentinels can be useful in the late game as well. But so this is kind of what it looks like. A lot of times I'll try to put in the Skyport with the capacity for alchemists in some of the minor settlements. So that's another little tip, because you do only need this at tier 3 to get the capacity increase for them. But that's kind of the buildings I would recommend and the composition that I would recommend going for. And like I said, I think that a little bit of cavalry, a lot of melee and missile infantry for the harmony bonuses, their synergy, and especially getting those missile units as early on as you can. It's going to be a key part of this campaign. Having discussed all these things, I think it's time to move on to the various rift cycles in order to talk about what I think some good goals to set are and how I envision a typical successful campaign progressing. So we're going to shift back to turn 1 and talk about the first rift cycle, so about the first 30 turns, what our goals should be for that, what we're looking to accomplish. Miao Ying's campaign starts out fairly hectic, a little more so than some campaigns, a little less than others, but there are some specific tasks that I think we should accomplish, and then some things that are a little more optional, but a lot more valuable. Before the first set of rifts spawn, we are looking to occupy our entire starting province here. We are looking to occupy the Snake Gate settlement. We want to remove this Tzeentch faction from within Cathay's borders. And we also, like I talked about in the overview, want to try to occupy the entire Warpstone Desert province if we can. We also need to establish positive relations with the Imperial Wardens and the Celestial Loyalists. So we kind of have a lot on our plate here. Some of it's just diplomacy and keeping track of different things. And I wouldn't necessarily expect that all of these things get done, especially capturing the Warpstone Desert. It is a bit of a stretch goal, but it's one that pays off big time if we can get it done. For now, we have more immediate things to focus on, however. We are going to want to just recruit a new lord, purely for the task of occupying the Snake Gate. Miao Ying should instead be focused on taking over the Gunpowder Road province, and when you recruit that lord, remember that Miao Ying is a yin focus, so you can just grab a yang lord and get yourself back on track with harmony really quickly and easily. We do eventually want to set up an army strong enough with Miao Ying to be able to take out Sarthoriel's Everwatcher's little settlement here. You can see it's probably going to be tough. They might already have a defensive building there. It's going to be a struggle and you'll take some losses. It's a brutal and punishing fight, but if we take them out early on, it prevents them from spreading and becoming a bigger problem later. As many of these individual threats as we can eliminate for some of these other factions here, that's going to help us out a lot, and we'll have plenty of time to recover from that fight afterwards. Now, assuming everything turned out okay at the start, we should be in a pretty comfortable position. I kept the army which occupied the Snake Gate, and I'm recruiting just some basic units into it. It's easy enough to get the upkeep reduction building in the Snake Gate early on, so you can afford to leave this army here. That way this lord is going to start gaining experience pretty easily and early on. And it's also going to help create that harmony bonus between the characters. Like I said, Miao Ying is going to have that 3 yin to start, so having a lord to offset that without having to overcompensate for buildings, I think can be kind of nice. You'll get experience for them, you'll keep the settlement safer while it's lower level and still developing, and get your harmony and balance more easily. I've taken out Sarthoriel's Everwatchers at the Terracotta Graveyard, and we took a lot of damage on it. I mean, you can see this army is small and pretty battered. We need to spend a little bit of time building up our forces again after fighting them, and then the next thing we want to do is try to advance and take the Warpstone Desert if we can. Now, the reason that I mention diplomatic efforts early on in this campaign is because of how early on it can pay off. Here we can see that even without very overwhelming strength of my own, I was able to confederate the Celestial Loyalists here in the north. The province that they hold, like I talked about, HawkeyeG specifically, but this overall province is easily the most valuable for Cathay in terms of both landmark buildings and trade resources. The Celestial Loyalists also tend to have a large number of territories, so it's a big jump ahead in strength earlier on. And as you can see, it hasn't really slowed my progress in taking over the Warpstone Desert. You can see that Zhao Ming is kind of running around trying to deal with the Skaven that he starts at war with. Pretty unfortunate for him. Gives us plenty of time to clean this up and isolate opponents, wipe them out one by one. It is worth mentioning here that it's important to balance out your military size and locations when these confederations start happening. I mentioned this in my quick tips guide as well. It's better to focus on aggression on one front and defenses on the other. Overextending early truly isn't necessary for us in the north early on in this campaign, and we'd stand to lose a lot more ground than we'd gain if something goes wrong. Plus, with the rifts coming up soon, the most important thing is to complete our original goals in this first phase and make sure the rifts are handled well. We want these northern territories, but you should be flexible in how you manage them and be willing to lose some ground there in the interim. So you can see we don't have a defensive structure here in Kunlan yet, and I'm taking the gold building because that's money. So we've got an army stationed here, but we have defenses in Mingju, and we're going to build defenses in Zanshi, but at least this place has the settlement walls to begin with. But so you can see I kind of want to build defenses on my flank. Sure, there's only one settlement, but my other army's down here and just doesn't have the time. Like, you want to make sure to prioritize things, take things one thing at a time. It would be nice to take this one last settlement, but it would be worse to lose 2 or 3 settlements in the process. Once we've reached this point, it's time to prepare to enter the Realms of Chaos. You can see it's turn 31. Urson has roared, but the rifts haven't opened yet. Now, which rift you prefer to enter is kind of up to you, though I do have another guide about how they work, and that might help your decision. However, the key here is to try and get some upgrades done on your main army, or at least as much as you can afford. You know, the stronger you are going into that first rift, the faster and more easily you'll be able to clear it and come back out the other side. Again, focusing missile units. You know, I don't have the shielded variant here, which I really would like, and maybe I should have just walked one settlement over, but I know that a portal will open here. So, and with the upkeep reduction, we can get some higher tier missile units. That'll help us out a lot, no matter which portal we go into. And again, there's still more of a stalemate up here in the north. We actually do see the Imperial Wardens kind of making some progress for us. So you can see how just holding the line and preventing the enemy from expanding, growing, doing any damage, that even just doing that is going to be good enough for now. We have an alliance with these people. We can continue to work towards confederating them. And we can also try to prevent things like this from happening, breaking down the gate. Again, something I've touched on in other videos, it's really important for you to personally and directly control these gates, because not only will you benefit from the money and experience for winning fights there, but it's just as you're going to be able to make the intelligent decisions in order to prevent them from being destroyed in the first place. So that's a really important thing to do. I definitely put it off too much and let Zhao Ming take these instead, and that was not the correct decision. So keep that in mind while you're playing this as well. But so we're ready to go into the first rifts. We're going to be able to stand our ground in pretty much every location. We should be fine when we come back. Now, if you look closely at the map, you'll see I'm technically not back from the rifts at this point in my campaign yet, but I'm only 2 turns away from wrapping up in Tzeentch's realm. When we get back, it should be obvious what our goals are. Secure the interior, right? With that gate getting destroyed, we had a full-size Chaos Force slip through and manage to attack us. We also still have this open rift that we weren't able to close because we were trying to deal with that. And of course, there's still a few minor enemy factions roaming around in Cathay. And once our army actually comes back from the realms, we should be able to deal with this directly and eliminate most, if not all, of these minor factions. We definitely want to consolidate the provinces that we have territory in, like the Imperial Road and the Forest of the Moon, or at least as much as we can. It shouldn't be too difficult once we're out of the realms. We have time to rebuild and restore and eliminate these enemies one by one. It's also time to start thinking about how to make your decision regarding handling the ogres. I think that if you want to keep fighting enemies and expanding in the mid to late game, that the ogres are a good option. Nobody says you have to be friends with Greasus, and the mountains are at least unpleasant climates, so it'll be moderate territory for you to take. Again, the other options are to fight Tzeentch, which you're not really going to want to hold this territory, or cross all the way to the Darklands, which is going to be, a little bit easier in terms of diplomatic management and the enemies that you fight, but it's so far away, and it's not necessarily economically better, right? So you can keep Greasus around as a friend and make alliances with him, maybe even get some units from him. Although I'm not certain about that. Well, I wasn't able to build an outpost in this campaign, so unfortunately I haven't been able to test it. I'm not sure how outposts work with the ogres quite yet. Otherwise, like I said, he makes for a good enemy. You can definitely pass the last, 30 to 60 turns just fighting him and making your way through the mountains if you're looking for that for enjoyment. Otherwise, it's really easy to just establish this southern choke point, become friends with them, and let them be a padding for you on the south side, and being able to just kind of turtle up and play out the rest of this campaign. But for now, we're focused on cleaning up the interior once we return, and making sure that all of these sorts of problems are sorted out, and getting this last confederation complete. Moving forward a little bit, there's really not a lot more to say here. We're back from the rifts, we're running down our enemies left and right, and we still got this army, and this guy's just kind of been dancing back and forth between my territory. With my lord's army in tow, we should be able to wipe it out. Again, that's a big reason why it's important to occupy the gates ourselves and prevent them from breaking down. I'm going to waste a bunch of time trying to chase this guy around and fight him instead of just moving on with my life and cleaning up what's left here. But we basically just continue to eliminate these minor factions so that all of Cathay is complete. We were able to get that other confederation, and then we can focus on whatever other project we want to do next, if there even is any. So moving forward a little bit more, once again, we're really hoping for the best here. I would say if your campaign doesn't look like this right now, don't be too upset by it. I think things worked out extremely well for me in the first 30 turns, and that really is where it matters most. That's where you can build the most momentum. Having all of Cathay wrapped up is a reasonable goal by this phase. Otherwise, undoubtedly, by the end of the next Rift cycle, right, getting that turn 20 confederation with the Celestial Loyalists, it's honestly not that difficult to achieve, or getting an early confederation with them regardless, but being able to control this territory, not having any major problems with the gates being broken down and slipping through, not having somebody like the Skaven or the Greenskins really getting a successful push on you in any direction. It's about playing balanced and fairly defensively, not overextending yourself, and you can reach this point. But again, not reaching this point, not having all the little details cleaned up before the second set of rifts open, that's totally okay. But this really does show the strength of a Cathay campaign. We are in an extremely comfortable position here. Should be easy to commit most of our armies to knocking out the various rifts that are going to spawn around Cathay, and then I'm going to probably place some protection buildings in these further provinces, right? Forests of the Moon here and the Imperial Road, so that I don't have to grab the portal here and here. Limit yourself so that you can leave 1 or 2 armies local and wipe out the portals that do spawn, so you can get experience and money that way. We can then commit the rest of our armies to whatever frontier we desire, whether that's pushing through the waste to get to Tzeentch, or maybe coming through the mountains to get to Tzeentch. Maybe we're fighting the ogres in the mountains, or we're trying to pass through to the Darklands below. Or if we're not doing any of those things, you might actually want to disband some of your armies and maybe even try to spend some of your money just throwing money at Kislev so they can better fight the Chaos forces there. Maybe throw some money at Greasus if you want to see him expand and do well and fight against Tzeentch for you. That's one of the interesting things about Cathay, is you can take control early on enough and have so few choke points. I'm going to have armies in the gates, but we can get big upkeep reduction on them. And once we do that, especially if we disband other armies, we can start paying other people to fight on our behalf and help, give them advantages. Sure, the computer has cheats, but that doesn't mean that they don't need the money, right? Now, at this point, all of Cathay belongs to us, or the other playable faction, by turn 60. We have control of the Bastion to block attacks from there. We have an easy choke point in the south of our own. We have another entire faction as padding for the other choke point in the south. And in this campaign, I've befriended the ogres, so we have even less to worry about there. Anyone who wants to attack us has to travel, long distance and maybe teleport hop through the mountains, or they have to directly attack the Bastion. With an army positioned at the southern choke point in the Bastion, we can ride this campaign out until it's over. So I'd actually say that at this point, I believe I've shown all that needs to be seen for a successful Northern Provinces campaign. I again want to stress that your map may not look like this by turn 60. I think it's reasonable to achieve, but things can go wrong. A rogue army can spawn in your lands, forces can break through the Bastion, or even if one of these minor factions gets just enough strength to push their weight around, it can set you back a decent amount of time. I do think that this is reasonable for turn 60, but otherwise by turn 90 your campaign should definitely look like this. Again, the only thing left to talk about is what to do with the rest of your time. We've talked about potentially fighting Greasus and taking over the Mountains of Morn, about it's moderately economically viable and probably the easiest thing to do. The Darklands is the safest option diplomatically. You're not really going to have to upset anybody of significance. It's just going to be a bunch of minor factions, and still will have some valuable territories for you. Or you can focus on trying to eliminate Tzeentch so you don't get halted every 10 turns past turn 100. It's going to be an absolute slog, and I generally don't recommend going straight through the Chaos Waste from the Bastion. If you do, don't occupy anything in the Red Waste. Just blow this stuff up and try to push through to the south here. But again, you don't have to do any of those things. You can just hold the Bastion and the southern choke point and potentially disband armies if you want to and fund other people's campaigns. But those are really all of our options. At this point, I mean, you can see from here I could just ride out the rest of the campaign as long as I'm doing the rifts. Again, it should be easily done from turn 90 as well. But in any case, I think I've said all that needs to be spoken. I really hope you enjoyed the video and you learned something new here today. I also hope it gives you more confidence in playing out your own campaigns. As long as you work on controlling the Bastion early and developing good relationships with other Cathayan factions in this campaign, it just gets easier the further you get. Then all you really have to do is grab the final souls and win the final battle. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please give a like and subscribe down below. And if you have any tips of your own, or you have any further questions on this campaign, please leave them in the comments section down below. Thank you for watching, have a great day, and we'll see you on the next one.